Hello and welcome to America's Forum here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. Our top story for this second hour of America's Forum is medical and legal marijuana and what it will mean for all of us.
That's somewhere probably, I don't know, about a pound maybe.
That is Sheriff Sam Cochran. He says this is the type of marijuana that deputies are seeing more and more, not in Colorado, not in Washington State. This is in Alabama. Despite the news of being flooded with stories of the legalization of marijuana in those two states, there's little attention paid to how decriminalization affects neighboring states.
In the mail, we see it in FedEx packages and UPS packages. People that have friends in Colorado and other states we expect in the future will be shipping it here.
So you're seeing the national impact here. Most of the marijuana is coming, as you just heard, from states like Colorado or Washington or California, where it's either legal for recreational use or legal for medicinal use. In last week's New York Times, we're talking about the tax impact here. Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper released an official budget that said the state could collect about $134 million in taxes from recreational and medical marijuana this year. It's just starting in July of this summer. And it's not only going to be impacting Colorado, as we heard there, but it's also crossing state lines. Joining me right now to discuss more of this is trial attorney Michelle Suskauer. Michelle, it's so good to have you with us.
Thanks. So glad to be here.
Right before this segment, we were talking about how many states have moved to decriminalize marijuana in one way, shape, or form. We were surprised kind of it's 26 states now.
26
More than
states.
half of the union.
It really is, and certainly there's a lot of, saying a vast majority of individuals in the states are actually supporting the legalization of marijuana. So it seems like that's where the trend is going. But I was very surprised to look at that number. And we're not just talking there's only 2 states where it's actually legal, but where they're decriminalizing it, where small amounts for personal use are actually legal in certain states, states that you'd be surprised about.
And talk to us about the difficulty this sets up between the state entities and the federal agencies, because it's still illegal on the federal level, but these state sheriffs, deputies, police officers, they're having to kind of work this on the fly and figure out how should they handle these cases.
That's right, especially in just what we were just looking at in terms of states that are getting, people are getting packages of marijuana where it may not be legal yet, or it may just be legal for medicinal purposes. But federally, it is still against federal law to possess marijuana. It's still a controlled substance, and it seems as though as long as the states are not thumbing their nose at the federal government, they are looking the other way.
Now, as a reporter, you used to go down to the courthouse and you'd check the probable cause affidavits and the search warrants. This is all public record, and you'd see, you know, this isn't something new. Maybe it's happening more and more often, but in terms of the amount of marijuana that's being shipped or driven into these other states, what point do these local law enforcement agencies get to say, we can't handle this anymore? We need the federal government to make a ruling on this.
Well, I mean, I think that the states are really behind the 8 ball here, because they've gone ahead and pushed through these different laws, and yet they can't look at this as in a vacuum. For example, like in DUI cases, where it seems like since marijuana may be legal or decriminalized, how do states deal with people driving under the influence of marijuana? And for example, in California, they're one of the very few states that's trying to deal with it and come up with standards. And as opposed to having a portable breathalyzer where you can actually test somebody's breath, they're actually using mouth swabs. And so that's something that really hasn't been tested legally yet. But we're going to be seeing this.
And talk to us, you know, if you can, about the differences between something like alcohol versus marijuana and how it's detected in the blood.
Well, in terms of, you know, when you have a drink, certainly, you know, you're looking at it, it says 6% alcohol or 14% alcohol. But when somebody is smoking a marijuana joint, it's not labeled saying, oh, by the way, this is extra potent. And then alcohol, of course, is absorbed within the body, and you're not going to have it in your system necessarily for maybe longer. And again, I'm not a doctor, 12 hours or 24 hours or however long that the body takes to eliminate it.
Yeah,
but marijuana stays in the system for a very long time.
There's not that clear-cut threshold where is established in court proceedings where a jury is going to be familiar with saying certain parts per million in your bloodstream means that you were intoxicated.
That's right. Now, Washington State, which is one of the 2 states where marijuana is legalized, they actually have a standard parts per THC, parts per milliliters,
Something like, yeah.
right, where they've actually been able to put that into place, but most of the states have not done that yet, and we're seeing a rise in DUIs. We're seeing a rise in drivers who are driving under the influence of THC.
Yeah, and so you think of a cost component in establishing these protocols on the, for criminal defense cases. It seems, very daunting, and as you're looking this in the everyday, the wheel of justice turns in these criminal, it's in and out.
Right.
There's already a huge backlog. Prisons and jails in this country are busting at the seams here.
Right.
At what point do you say, look, there needs to be a way we handle these cases? DUI obviously is something separately, but these nonviolent drug offenders, we've heard Rick Perry talk about this in Texas, a way to use drug courts in a more effective manner. Are we coming to that point?
I think we are. I mean, I think that's why you're seeing so many states going in the direction of decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. I mean, there still seems to be most of the states do have things in common in terms of, although so many have slight differences, in terms of the age of use, in terms of public consumption. So it's not a free-for-all, even in the states that right now are legalized. But people, the governors and legislatures are realizing that we should not be locking up folks that are involved using small amounts of marijuana. We just don't have the money. We don't have the time in the court system to litigate these cases.
Now, that's interesting. And when if you prosecute any cases that, are particular to what we're seeing in trends of marijuana use, in court today, do you see that there's a change in mentality from the judges in these cases, too, that they're starting to get a better idea of the reality of the situation?
Well, I think that, there really hasn't been minimum mandatory sentences in small amounts of marijuana, and I think that judges really have never taken, or at least in my experience, these small misdemeanor cases in, too much regard. We're not locking up folks for small amounts of marijuana, but the fact that we're decriminalizing it, I think is really moving in the direction where a lot of people really want it to go.
All right. Well, interesting take on all this, because certainly things are changing. What do you see as, as the biggest obstacle here into having more of a cohesive national policy in dealing with marijuana?
I mean, I think it's, it's going to be a very difficult situation, because you have every state that wants to do things their own particular way, and they have a right to do that. And so, you have states that there's some states where they're permitting cultivation of marijuana, and then you have other states where they can have a small amount or a certain amount of grams, but only for personal use. I mean, if you go across the 26 different states, everything is so significantly different. To have a national view of, and for just like in terms of DUI, really it's 0.08 in terms of the blood level across the country. I just think we're far away from having some sort of national standard.
Yeah, you can see this in areas of drug importation. They just had this big kingpin arrested down in Mexico. The federal government has to play a role in that, but in the state level, we were just kind of highlighting how difficult it is, because every state is different, and particularly on this issue with much different attitudes in Colorado as opposed to places in the Deep South or more conservative states.
Oh, absolutely. And in terms of like certain states that may just have a small amount of personal use, but are still prosecuting folks that are, have something more than a very small amount. I mean, they don't want to go in that direction. There are certain governors are saying, we don't care, despite the amount of money that we may be making, we just don't want to go in that direction.
Most importantly, it's still illegal on the federal level, so you're taking certain risks if you do
use it and mail it, sir.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Do not mail it. Keep it out of the mail. Thanks very much, Michelle Suskauer.
My pleasure.
Thanks for your insight there. We'll have much more here on America's Forum. When we come right back, we'll talk to Nick Tate a little bit about the marijuana and what it means for health, plus news about testosterone, and more information about your heart and your heart's health. We'll be right back here on America's Forum right after this.